In this video, we're going to show you how to change your differential fluid. Let's get to it. Changing your differential fluid is super easy, and all you need are these common tools. First, you need a wrench with the right size socket to crack the differential cover bolts. You'll need a plastic razor blade scraper to remove the old gasket material. And of course, you need a new gasket. We like to use a combination of both liquid gasket and a regular gasket to have a perfect seal. Make sure to wear nitrile gloves because skin contact with liquid seal or differential fluid is not good for your health. Then you'll need fresh differential fluid and a fluid pump with a tube to pump it into the differential through the fill hole. You also need a bucket or oil drain pan to catch all the old differential fluid in so it doesn't spill onto the ground. But be careful, a lot of people forget to check if the vent is open. If you don't open the vent, fluid won't drain quick enough and will spill over the side. Lastly, it's best to use a torque wrench to tighten the bolts to the right spec so they don't leak and you don't accidentally over-tighten them. Then the first thing you need to do is lift your car so you can work under it. You can, of course, put your car on a car lift so you don't have to crawl underneath it. But if you don't have access to one, we put a link to our video on how to safely lift your car and put it on jack stands down in the description below so you can safely work under it. So make sure to check it out. But put your entire car on jack stands and make sure it's level. Otherwise, the fluid level won't be accurate when filling it back up. For 95% of older vehicles, the differential is this large, round part of the axle and has a large cover with bolts all around and a fill plug almost halfway up. With rear-wheel drive cars, it's located on the rear axle, and four-wheel drive cars have one on both the front and rear axle. Because our rear differential is a lot harder to reach and film, we're going to demonstrate everything on the front differential. The process is exactly the same. Now, before you take out all the differential cover bolts and let the fluid drain, you first need to check if you can take out the fill plug. Otherwise, you can't fill it back up again when it's stuck. And with an empty differential, you can't even drive anywhere for help. Otherwise, the friction will overheat and destroy the gears in your differential. Our differential fill plug can be opened with a 1/2-inch wrench, but for some vehicles, you'll need an Allen key. Next, just remove it by hand. If it's filled correctly, there will be a bit of fluid dripping out. One thing you should also check is the back of the fill plug, which is often magnetic. As you can see, there's a layer of metal paste on there, but don't panic. That's normal. You should take a piece of paper and spread it out to see if there are any larger chunks in there, which is an indication that the teeth of the gears are damaged. It's a nice and even paste without any metal chunks, so this is perfect. Remove as much of the metal as possible. Put the fill plug back in and wipe the area. When taking off the differential cover, a lot of people let the top bolt loosely in there so the cover doesn't fall off. But we prefer to leave both top corner bolts in because with a single bolt, the cover might pivot and sling oil around, which might end up on the floor next to your oil drain pan, which can't happen with 2 bolts. When you've placed your oil drain pan under the differential, it's time to take the cover off and let it drain. First, loosen the 2 top corner bolts and then take out all the other bolts. Normally, nothing is going to happen yet as the cover will still stick to the gasket. If your differential cover has a regular gasket, chances are you can just hit it sideways a few times with a rubber mallet to vibrate it loose. And then normally the cover will come off without too much of a fight. But if your differential cover is sealed with liquid gasket, using this method probably won't cut it. You also don't want to hit it too hard or you'll risk denting the cover. The only way to get it off when it's stuck is by prying it loose with a flat chisel or screwdriver. You want to pry it loose at a hole because this outer edge isn't that important for the seal. So when you scratch it, you'll still have the inside part of the gasket that's going to give you a perfect seal. If you pry between the holes, you risk scratching the entire width of the contact area and, more importantly, bend the edge, which will ruin the seal. If you bend the edge of the hole, the bolt will just pull it flat, no problem. Then gently wedge the chisel in between there, keeping it flat to avoid scratches. We prefer a chisel over a screwdriver because a chisel is wider, which reduces the chance of damaging the contact area even further. Gently wiggle it in between there. You don't want to jam it in and damage the contact area. Then keep some tension on there while the silicone gasket slowly lets go. And just like that, it pops open. Keep it open until the majority of the fluid is out and then let it drain further while removing the last 2 bolts and taking the differential cover off. Before we can install a new gasket, we first need to remove as much of the old gasket as possible. To do so, you want to use a plastic razor blade scraper, never a metal one, because you risk scratching the contact area, which will ruin the seal. After scraping off as much of the liquid gasket as possible with the plastic razor blade scraper, clean out the inside of the differential. Behind the bottom contact area, there's a lower point that doesn't drain and is still filled with about an inch of oil. Not only that, but all the sludge and metal shavings also gather there, so it's important that you clean this out as well. Just look at how dirty our rag gets from wiping the bottom of the differential. All that black stuff is metal shavings and gunk. Keep doing this until the majority of the oil is removed. Then grab some brake cleaner and spray it down, but try to avoid spraying on the gears themselves. You don't want to degrease them. Once the bottom of the differential is degreased, you should be able to take a fresh piece of paper and wipe across the bottom without any gunk or grease sticking to it. Now there's no oil dripping out anymore. We're going to put some extra effort in cleaning the contact area below the fill level with some sandpaper to make sure we don't have any leaks. With the differential itself cleaned, you need to repeat the same process on the differential cover. Clean off all the gunk and oil on the cover itself. You'd be surprised how much comes off. Then use the plastic razor blade scraper to remove as much of the old liquid gasket as possible. Sometimes it comes off without a fight. Other times you'll have to grab a piece of sandpaper and sand the surface smooth. It's important to have a flat contact area, otherwise the gasket won't be able to form a good seal. And if you don't have a perfect seal, you'll have a leaking differential. And the only way to fix a leaking differential is, you guessed it, do it all over again but better, so you have a perfect seal. That's why we like to do it properly the first time. Just look at that difference. From a dirty, gunked up cover to one that will make a perfect seal. For the next steps, you'll have to work at a steady pace, because the ART-TV liquid seal will cure in about 5 to 10 minutes. Although it's not necessary to use RTV in a regular gasket at the same time, it helps to seal imperfect surfaces and can never harm the seal, so you can't go wrong with it. Some people say it's overkill, but we like the extra safety. This method has never failed us in the past. You want to apply a thin bead of RTV around the entire differential and around the holes. It doesn't need to look perfect. Just make sure everything is covered and you're not working too slow. Remember, you need to apply RTV to the other side too. Then stick the regular gasket onto the RTV and make sure the holes are lined up correctly. Differentials are usually not symmetrical, so make sure you have it on correctly. Then quickly do the same for the other side. A thin layer all around the cover and around the holes. With the RTV gasket in place, we need to quickly install the differential cover before the liquid gasket fully hardens. Again, make sure the cover is on correctly. The holes need to line up and the fill plug needs to be on the bottom half. First, put in 2 bolts on opposite sides so the holes are perfectly lined up and the cover stays in place. Then hand tighten all the other bolts. With all the bolts in place, tighten them with a wrench. When all the bolts are securely tightened, grab a torque wrench and torque them to the right specs as mentioned in your owner's manual. Then wipe off the excess RTV. By now, you'll probably notice that it's not that liquid anymore and really starting to cure. After letting it cure for another 15 minutes, it's time to fill it back up again with fresh differential fluid. Then open the fill plug again and grab your differential fluid and pump. Put the nozzle in the fill hole and start pumping. This might take a while, but keep going until you see it coming back out of the fill hole. This is why your car needs to be level when changing the fluids. Otherwise, the fluid level won't be right and you'll put too much or too little fluid in your car. And just like that, the differential is filled to the correct level. It's that easy. Put the fill plug back in hand tight and clean the excess fluid from the differential cover. Then tighten it with a torque wrench to the correct specs. Degrease the area and you're done. Now you know how to change your differential fluid. Thanks for watching. If you liked our video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. It helps out the channel a lot. And don't forget to hit that bell button so you don't miss any of our uploads. More videos are on the way, so we'll see you on the next one.